Envision this scenario. August of the year 2024, Alcoa Reservoir, Wyoming. A pair of recreational fishermen from the city of Casper are positioned on the water, relishing one of those flawless late summer mornings that render Wyoming magnificent. The variety of day where the sky extends infinitely and the mountains stand razor-sharp against the horizon line. They're utilizing a high-resolution fish-finding device, the most recent technology that can chart underwater topography in remarkable detail, searching for the deep pockets where the substantial walleye prefer to conceal themselves. At a depth of 20 feet beneath the surface, in a section of the reservoir approximately 200 yards from the northern shoreline, their sonar equipment detects something that appears out of place. The configuration is excessively regular, excessively geometric to be a natural rock structure or a submerged tree trunk. It resembles a vehicle, an automobile resting on the reservoir floor, preserved in the frigid Wyoming water for a longer duration than either of them has existed. Within a matter of hours, the Natrona County Sheriff's Department has diving teams positioned in the water. By that same evening, they verified what the sonar equipment had suggested. It's a 1961 Mercury Comet, once painted a vibrant forest green, but now dulled and blanketed in silt deposits, sitting upright on the bottom, as if it had merely driven in and settled in that location. The Wyoming license plate, corroded but still decipherable, tells a narrative that has troubled Casper for 62 years. WY4-8472. Registered to Ashley Mitchell, a 28-year-old nurse who departed from Natrona County Memorial Hospital following her night shift on November 23, 1962, and was never observed again. Inside the Mercury Comet, still positioned behind the steering wheel, are skeletal remains that have been present since the Kennedy administration, throughout the Vietnam War, throughout Watergate, throughout the turn of the millennium, throughout everything that's transpired in America across 6 decades. Ashley Mitchell, devoted nurse, cherished daughter, esteemed professional, had been precisely there all along, nearly 20 feet beneath the surface of a reservoir that thousands upon thousands of people fish, boat, and swim in every single year. If you're attracted to mysteries where dedication exacts everything, where the perils of everyday work are disregarded by history, then subscribe immediately, right now. Hit that button and activate notifications, because what I'm preparing to share is a narrative that will make you contemplate differently about everyone who works the night shift, who drives home in hazardous conditions, who keeps society functioning while the remainder of us sleep. By the conclusion of this video presentation, you'll comprehend why this discovery has reopened questions about workplace safety standards, dangerous roadways, and how effortlessly someone can disappear even when they do everything correctly. The question isn't merely how Ashley's automobile ended up at the bottom of Alcoa Reservoir. The question is, why did she take a route that guided her there, and what transpired on that November night that sent a careful, experienced driver into the water? Ashley Mitchell was 28 years old in the autumn of 1962, and everything about her communicated competence and compassion. Standing at a height of 5 feet 6 inches with a slender build that resulted from being constantly on her feet during 12-hour shifts, Ashley possessed the kind of quiet presence that made patients feel secure. Her auburn hair was perpetually pulled back in a practical bun when she worked, though on her days away from work she wore it down, falling to her shoulders in soft waves. She had green eyes that appeared to observe everything, that noticed when patients were experiencing pain before they verbalized anything, that caught subtle alterations in condition that less observant nurses might overlook. Her hands were nurses' hands, perpetually moving, perpetually doing something productive, checking pulses, adjusting intravenous lines, holding the hand of a frightened patient. She wore her nursing school ring on her right hand and a simple silver watch on her left wrist, the variety with a second hand that permitted her to count heartbeats and respirations with precision. Her fingernails were maintained short and practical, never polished, because that wasn't considered professional in 1962 nursing standards. Born in 1934 in Casper, Ashley was the eldest of 3 children in a working-class family household. Her father, Robert Mitchell, worked at the Standard Oil refinery facility, one of Casper's major employers. Her mother, Dorothy, was a homemaker who accepted sewing work to supplement the family income. Ashley had a younger brother, James, who was 24 in 1962 and working as a mechanic, and a younger sister, Carol, who was 22 and recently married. Ashley had understood she wanted to be a nurse since she was 15 years old when her grandmother had been hospitalized with pneumonia. She'd observed the nurses' work, witnessed their skill and dedication, comprehended that nursing was a calling as much as a career profession. After graduating from Natrona County High School in 1952, she attended nursing school in Cheyenne, residing in the dormitory, studying late into the night hours, learning anatomy and pharmacology and the 100 small skills that make the difference between adequate care and excellent care. She'd graduated in 1955, passed her state board examinations on the first attempt, and returned to Casper to work at Natrona County Memorial Hospital, the solitary hospital in the city. By 1962, she'd been there for 7 years, working primarily on the medical surgical floor, though she could float to any unit when required. She'd witnessed everything: automobile accidents on icy highways, ranch injuries, complications from diabetes and heart disease, premature babies fighting for life. Nothing disturbed her composure. She was the nurse that doctors trusted implicitly, that other nurses looked to for guidance and direction, that patients remembered years afterwards. Her typical schedule in late 1962 was the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. evening shift, though she sometimes worked nights, the dreaded 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift that played havoc with sleep patterns, but that someone had to cover. She didn't object. The night shift often meant quieter hospital wards, more time to spend with patients who couldn't sleep, opportunities to genuinely care for people rather than just managing the chaos of daytime hospital operations. Ashley resided in a small apartment on Casper's south side, a modest one-bedroom place that she maintained immaculately clean. She owned very little beyond the essentials: a few changes of clothing, some books, a radio, her nursing textbooks that she still consulted when faced with unfamiliar conditions. She wasn't married, had never been engaged, though she dated occasionally. The truth was that nursing consumed most of her energy, and the men she encountered in Casper in the early 1960s often didn't understand a woman who was passionate about her career. Her pride and joy was the 1961 Mercury Comet she'd purchased brand new in February of that year, paying for it with money she'd saved carefully over 5 years. The Comet was one of the new compact cars Ford was manufacturing, smaller and more fuel-efficient than the large sedans that dominated American roads, but still stylish and well-constructed. Ashley's was forest green with a white interior, an automatic transmission system, and a straight-six engine that was reliable in Wyoming's harsh climate conditions. She maintained it carefully and meticulously, following the service schedule precisely, keeping the tires properly inflated, making certain it was always ready for winter driving conditions. What made Ashley special and memorable, what everyone who worked with her remembered clearly, was her absolute dedication to her patients. She wasn't in nursing for the paycheck, though the money was decent for a single woman in 1962. She was there because she believed in caring for people, in easing suffering, in being present during some of life's most vulnerable moments. She'd stay late if a patient needed her, would come in on days off to check on someone she was worried about, would sit with dying patients so they wouldn't be alone in their final moments. Her family worried about her constantly, particularly when she worked late shifts. Wyoming highways in winter were dangerous and treacherous, and the drive from the hospital to her apartment took her along roads that could turn perilous in minutes when weather conditions changed. Ashley would reassure them that she was careful, that she understood how to drive in snow, that she'd lived in Wyoming her entire life and comprehended winter conditions thoroughly. On the evening of November 22, 1962, Ashley reported for her evening shift at 3 p.m.
PM as scheduled. November in Wyoming is unpredictable and variable, sometimes mild, sometimes brutal, and that week had been particularly volatile. A storm system was moving across the state, bringing the first major snow accumulation of the season. The forecast called for increasing snow overnight with several inches expected by morning hours. The hospital was busy that particular evening, the usual mixture of scheduled admissions and emergency cases. Ashley worked her shift with her characteristic efficiency and competence, checking on post-operative patients, administering medications, documenting everything in careful handwriting in the patient charts and records. Around 9 p.m., the snow started falling, light at first, but gradually intensifying in strength. By 10 p.m., it was coming down heavily, accumulating on roads and sidewalks throughout the area. The evening shift supervisor, a woman named Margaret Henderson, who'd worked with Ashley for years, approached her around 10:30 p.m. The roads were getting bad and dangerous, Margaret said. Maybe Ashley should leave a little early, get home before conditions deteriorated further and became worse. Ashley considered it but declined the suggestion. She had patients to check on, medications to administer at 11 p.m., documentation to complete properly. She'd worked in worse weather than this. She said she'd be fine and safe. At 11:05 p.m., Ashley clocked out, having stayed 5 minutes past her scheduled end time to finish charting on a patient whose condition concerned her greatly. She pulled on her heavy wool coat, tied a scarf over her hair, and walked out into the November night. The temperature was in the low 20s degrees. The wind was gusting substantially, and snow was falling so thickly and heavily that visibility was reduced down to a few hundred feet. Margaret Henderson, who left a few minutes after Ashley departed, was the last person to see her alive and well. She watched Ashley brush snow off the Mercury Comet in the EAV hospital parking lot, saw her get in and start the engine, saw the Comet's tail lights disappear into the snowy darkness, heading toward the hospital exit. That was 11:15 p.m., November 22, 1962. Ashley's typical route home took her south on Center Street to 2nd Street, then east toward her apartment. It was a straightforward and simple drive, maybe 10 minutes in good conditions, perhaps 20 minutes in the snow. She should have been home by 11:35 p.m. at the latest possible time. But Ashley Mitchell never arrived at her apartment that night. And somewhere between leaving Natrona County Memorial Hospital and the place she should have been safe, something went terribly and catastrophically wrong. Ashley's mother, Dorothy, expected her daughter to call when she got home safely, a routine they'd established when Ashley started working late shifts. When midnight came and went with no call, Dorothy started to worry and become anxious. By 12:30 a.m., she'd called Ashley's apartment telephone. No answer whatsoever. By 1 a.m., she'd woken her husband, Robert, and they'd driven through the storm to Ashley's apartment. Her car wasn't there. The apartment was dark and cold and empty. At 1:30 a.m. on November 23, 1962, Robert Mitchell called the Casper Police Department to report her daughter missing. The officer who took the call was sympathetic, but not immediately alarmed or concerned. It was a bad storm, he said. Maybe Ashley had stopped somewhere to wait it out. Maybe she'd gone to a friend's house for shelter. Give it until morning light. But morning came and arrived, and Ashley didn't. Friday, November 23rd, dawned cold and white, 6 inches of fresh snow blanketing Casper and surrounding areas. The storm had moved on eastward, leaving clear skies and treacherous, slippery roads. The Mitchell family's calls became more frantic and desperate. Ashley would never just not come home without explanation. Something was wrong and terrible. By Friday afternoon, police were taking the case seriously and with urgency. Ashley Mitchell wasn't the type to disappear without explanation. She was responsible, reliable, deeply connected to her family and work. Officers began checking her route home carefully, looking for any sign of the green Mercury Comet, any indication of where she might have gone or been.
They found nothing whatsoever on the direct route from hospital to apartment. No abandoned car, no accident scene, no tracks leading off the road that they could detect under the fresh snow accumulation. The search expanded in scope. Had Ashley stopped for gas? The service stations she usually used reported no contact with her. Had she gone to a friend's house? Calls to her colleagues and friends revealed nothing useful. The storm complicated everything immensely. Any tracks the comet might have left behind had been covered and concealed by 6 inches of snow. Any accident scene would be hidden under white blanket. Visibility during the search was limited considerably, and temperatures were now in the single digits, making extensive ground searches difficult and dangerous for searchers. The investigation revealed something puzzling and confusing. Several witnesses reported seeing a green Mercury Comet driving on Highway 220, the road that led west toward Alcoa and the reservoir, sometime between 11:30 p.m. and midnight on November 22nd. This made no sense whatsoever. Highway 220 was nowhere near Ashley's route home. Why would she have been out there, miles from where she should have been, on a night when every mile of unnecessary driving was dangerous and potentially fatal? Theories emerged quickly and rapidly. Some suggested Ashley was meeting someone at Alcoa, perhaps a romantic interest she'd kept secret from family. But Ashley's friends and family insisted this was out of character completely. She wasn't secretive about her personal life, and she certainly wouldn't drive out to a remote location during a snowstorm for a rendezvous or meeting. Others wondered if she'd gotten lost in the storm conditions, become disoriented and confused, taken a wrong turn that led toward the reservoir accidentally. But Ashley knew Casper intimately and thoroughly, had driven these roads her entire adult life. Getting lost seemed highly improbable. A darker theory suggested foul play and criminal activity. Had Ashley been forced to drive to Alcoa? Had she been kidnapped, her car taken to a remote location? But there was no evidence of struggle at the hospital, no witnesses reporting anything suspicious, no ransom demands ever made, no body discovered anywhere. The search for Ashley Mitchell and her green Mercury Comet became one of the most extensive operations Natrona County had witnessed. Police, volunteers, Civil Air Patrol aircraft, everyone who could help spent days searching highways, back roads, the vast empty spaces around Casper where a car could conceivably have gone off the road and been hidden and concealed by snow. Alcoa Reservoir, frozen and snow-covered in late November, was barely considered seriously. A few searchers walked along the visible shoreline, looking for any sign of tracks leading to the ice surface, but the fresh snow revealed nothing whatsoever. No one seriously considered that a car could have gone through ice that should have been forming and solid at that time. The reservoir was checked off the list, and the search moved on to other areas and locations. Weeks passed by slowly. The snow melted and refroze several times throughout December. If Ashley's car had gone off a road somewhere, the changing conditions were destroying evidence daily and hourly. By Christmas 1962, the intensive search had wound down considerably. The case remained open officially, but there were no leads to follow, no evidence to examine, no direction to take the investigation forward. The Mitchell family faced a nightmare scenario. They had no body to bury, no closure or resolution, no understanding of what had happened to their beloved daughter and sister. Ashley simply vanished completely, driven away from work into a snowstorm, and ceased to exist. The hospital held a memorial service in January 1963, honoring a nurse who'd given everything to her profession and had received tragedy in return. Dorothy Mitchell never recovered emotionally. She kept Ashley's apartment exactly as it was for years afterward, paying the rent regularly, unable to accept that her daughter was gone forever. She died in 1976 at age 64, having spent 14 years waiting for Ashley to come home. James Mitchell, Ashley's younger brother, was 24 when she disappeared. The loss devastated him completely.
And entirely. Ashley had been more than a sister to him. She'd been a mentor, someone he looked up to with admiration, someone who'd encouraged him to pursue his interests and build a good life for himself. He spent years searching for her, following every rumor, every reported sighting of a green Mercury Comet, every lead that went nowhere and provided no answers. He married, had children of his own, built a successful auto repair business in Casper, but a part of him never moved past November 22, 1962. Carol, the younger sister, had been 22 when Ashley vanished without trace. She moved away from Wyoming in 1965, unable to bear living in a place filled with memories and unanswered questions that haunted her. She settled in Colorado, raised her family there successfully, but she never forgot the sister who disappeared into a snowstorm that terrible night. The 1960s became the 1970s, and Casper changed and evolved. The oil industry boomed and busted cyclically. New highways were built and constructed. The hospital where Ashley had worked was renovated and expanded significantly. Natrona County Memorial Hospital became Wyoming Medical Center. The staff who'd known Ashley retired or moved away to other locations, and her name faded from institutional memory gradually. Alcoa Reservoir continued its existence and purpose, a popular recreation area about 30 miles southwest of Casper. Created in the 1930s by damming the North Platte River, the reservoir provided irrigation water, hydroelectric power generation, and opportunities for fishing, boating, and swimming activities. Thousands of people used it every year for recreation, completely unaware and ignorant that 20 feet below the surface, in a section near the northern shore, Ashley Mitchell's final moments were frozen in time eternally. The theories about Ashley's disappearance evolved over decades of speculation. In the 1970s, some believed she'd been a victim of a serial killer, though no similar cases emerged to support this theory. In the 1980s, as more women entered professional careers, some revisited the case with new perspectives and viewpoints, questioning whether someone had targeted Ashley because she was a successful independent woman in an era when that was still controversial and uncommon. By the 2000s, with the rise of internet databases and cold case investigations, amateur detectives occasionally took interest in Ashley Mitchell's disappearance case. They'd analyze the limited evidence available, proposed new theories and hypotheses, but nothing ever led anywhere concrete or productive. The case was simply too old, too cold, too devoid of solid evidence to solve. James Mitchell, Ashley's brother, was 86 years old in 2024, living in a retirement community facility in Casper. His health was failing gradually, his memory not what it once was in earlier years, but he'd never stopped thinking about his sister constantly. In his room, he kept a photograph of Ashley in her nursing uniform, smiling at the camera, captured in a moment of happiness that would prove all too brief and fleeting. And then, on that August morning in 2024, two fishermen saw something on their sonar screen that would finally answer questions that had haunted a family for 62 years of anguish. The recovery operation took 4 complete days. The Natrona County Sheriff's Department brought in specialized diving teams experienced with underwater vehicle recovery operations. The Mercury Comet sat at approximately 20 feet of depth in water that was cold even in August summer months, but clear enough for divers to work effectively and safely. The car was remarkably preserved and intact. The Wyoming cold temperatures, the specific mineral content of the reservoir water, and the sealed nature of the vehicle interior had prevented the complete deterioration that would occur in other environmental conditions. The forest green paint was faded, but recognizable still. The chrome trim was corroded, but intact overall. And inside, still positioned behind the steering wheel, with her seatbelt fastened properly, were the skeletal remains of Ashley Mitchell.
The forensic examination revealed details that finally explained what happened on November 22, 1962. The car showed no signs whatsoever of having been in a collision or impact. The steering wheel wasn't bent or damaged. The dashboard wasn't crushed or deformed. This wasn't a high-speed accident scenario. Instead, the evidence suggested the Mercury Comet had simply driven into the reservoir, perhaps through thin ice, or perhaps before the ice had formed enough thickness to support the vehicle's weight properly. The position of the car angled downward from the northern shore matched with a section of Highway 220 that in 1962 had run much closer to the reservoir than it does today, currently. Road realignment over the decades had moved the highway further from the water's edge, but in 1962 there was a stretch where the pavement came within 50 feet of the reservoir's edge, with nothing but a shallow ditch and darkness between road and water. Investigators reconstructed what they believed happened that fateful night. Ashley Mitchell, driving in heavy snow with limited visibility conditions, had somehow ended up on Highway 220 instead of her usual route home. Whether this was a navigational error in the storm conditions, an intentional detour for reasons unknown and unknowable, or confusion in the storm conditions couldn't be determined with certainty. At some point along that section of highway near the reservoir, her car had left the road surface. In the darkness and snow, Ashley wouldn't have seen the reservoir water ahead. There were no guardrails in place in 1962, no reflectors, no barriers to prevent vehicles from leaving the roadway. She might have thought she was just sliding off the shoulder onto flat ground temporarily. By the time she realized she was heading toward water, it was too late to react. The Mercury Comet entered the reservoir, and despite the early November date, the water was deep enough and cold enough that the car sank quickly and rapidly. The interior of the car, when examined carefully, told the story of Ashley's final moments alive. Her purse was on the passenger seat, her nurse's cape folded neatly beside it, with characteristic care. Her hands were still on the steering wheel in driving position. The driver's side window was partially rolled down, suggesting she'd tried desperately to escape as the car filled with water, but the doors, pressed shut by water pressure, wouldn't have opened despite her efforts. The seatbelt, fastened because Ashley always followed safety rules diligently, trapped her in place behind the wheel. She would have had perhaps 30 seconds to a minute maximum as the car sank and water poured in through the open window. Understanding what was happening to her, unable to escape the vehicle, drowning in the cold darkness of Alcoa Reservoir waters. The discovery sent shockwaves throughout Casper, particularly among the medical community and the families of those who'd worked at the old hospital facility. James Mitchell received the telephone call on August 15, 2024. He was in his room at the retirement community, dozing in the afternoon sun, when his daughter came in with news that would finally close a chapter that had been open for 62 years of uncertainty. They'd found Aunt Ashley. They'd found her car submerged. She'd been in Alcoa Reservoir all along these decades. James wept openly, a mixture of relief and renewed grief washing over him simultaneously. Relief that after 60 decades they knew what happened finally, that Ashley hadn't been murdered or kidnapped, that her death had been a tragic accident rather than something sinister and evil. Grief because now it was final, confirmed scientifically, irrevocable and absolute. His sister, who he'd hoped against logic might somehow still be alive somewhere, was truly gone, permanently. The forensic team worked for weeks analyzing every detail meticulously. The Mercury Comet's speedometer was frozen at 42 miles per hour, suggesting Ashley had been driving at reasonable speed for weather conditions. The fuel gauge showed half a tank remaining, ruling out any emergency related to running out of fuel. Her nurse's bag, found in the back seat area, contained her stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, medical reference cards, the tools of her trade that she'd carried even off-duty hours. Most poignantly and heartbreakingly, they found a letter in her purse, written to her mother, but never mailed or sent. It was dated November 20th, 1962. In it, Ashley talked about her patients at the hospital, about a little girl who was finally going home after surgery, about plans for Thanksgiving celebration, about how grateful she was for her family's support. The letter ended with a simple line, "I'll see you Thursday for dinner. Love always, Ashley."